an orange peel in Auckland, New Zealand, a passenger jet in Rio de Janeiro, a pile of coal waste on a hillside in South Wales. None of them are doing anything yet. None of them look dangerous. And in the next few hours, or the next few days, or the next few weeks, each of them is going to be at the center of one of the strangest stories about death I have ever come across. 2 people are about to cheat death. Another one already saw it coming. I'm Carol Ann. Welcome to the In-Between. We tell ourselves that death is random, that it has no memory, that it doesn't circle back. But every once in a while, I come across a story that makes me question all of that. Someone survives something that they had no business surviving, and then something else finds them. Something quieter, something that shouldn't have mattered at all. Or worse, someone tries to warn us that it's coming, and we don't listen until it's too late. Fate whispering before it strikes. Today, we have 3 stories, all true and fully documented, and not one of them has an ending that makes sense. What kills a man who cannot be killed? That's the question. And before I give you the answer, I need to tell you how he earned that title. Because what Bobby Leach survived should not have been survivable. But what killed him should not have been fatal. July 25th, 1911, Niagara Falls. Inside the barrel, Bobby Leach can't hear anything anymore. Not the crowd on the bank, not his crew shouting last-minute instructions, not even the river. The sound of Niagara Falls at close range is not loud, it's absolute. It's the absence of everything else. It fills the lungs and presses down on the chest like a physical weight. Bobby is lying on his side, his knees bent to fit inside the steel cylinder. The padding he'd spent months perfecting presses against his shoulders. His hands are braced flat against the interior walls. He has no idea what is about to happen to his body. The barrel tips. For a fraction of a second, less time than it takes to blink, he's weightless. Then the falls take him. Bobby, who was born in Cornwall, England, and is now around 53 years old, is a former circus performer with Barnum and Bailey. And he has spent the better part of 2 years designing this moment. The barrel is custom built from reinforced steel, padded internally, and engineered to absorb impact. He studied the water patterns at the base of the Horseshoe Falls, and he knows about Annie Edson Taylor, the school teacher who went over in a barrel back in 1901, the first person ever to survive the plunge. And Bobby believes if a 63-year-old woman can do it, he can do it better. He said that several times, loudly, to anyone who would listen. His barrel drops 167 feet in approximately 3 seconds. When it finally bobs to the surface and his crew hauls it to the shore and pry the hatch open, they don't hear Bobby moving around inside. They hear nothing. 10 seconds, 20, 30 seconds. Bobby's not responding to anything. Then he groans. When they lift him out, both of his kneecaps are shattered. His jaw is broken, and he has deep cuts on his arms from where he'd been thrown against the inside, even with the padding. He is about to spend the next 6 months in a hospital bed. But he's alive. Bobby Leach has just become the second person in recorded history to survive going over Niagara Falls in a barrel. And the first man. The recovery is brutal. Multiple surgeries on his kneecaps. For weeks, he can't walk at all. Then, more weeks relearning how. But Bobby becomes famous. Not a little famous or locally famous. He becomes the kind of rock star famous that gets you booked on world tours. He travels across Canada, the United States, and England, just to name a few spots. retelling the story of what it felt like to go over the falls. People pack the house in every hall and theater to hear him describe the sound, the sensation, the moment the barrel hit the bottom. He shows the photographs. He shows the barrel. For 15 years, Bobby basks in the glory as a man who has beaten something that kills most people who touch it. He is, by every measurable standard, exceptional. Now here's where I need you to hold on to that thought, because what happens next is one of those details that sounds like it has to be made up, but it isn't. 15 years later, in 1926, Bobby is on a publicity tour in New Zealand. He's in his late 60s now, still doing appearances, still drawing crowds. He's walking down a street in Auckland on his way to a speaking engagement. It's a regular day, clear weather, no unusual circumstances. Bobby steps on something on the sidewalk. His foot slides out from under him, and he goes down hard on his right side. And when he hits, he feels his leg snap. The break is a nasty one, but it is, by any reasonable medical assessment, survivable. No big deal. He's already survived things that should have killed him outright. This should be a cakewalk. But 1926 is before antibiotics are a regular thing, and fractures in older patients can be pretty risky. The break site begins to show signs of infection within days. The infection turns to gangrene and spreads into the surrounding tissue. Surgeons amputate the leg, trying to stop the progression, but it's not enough. Bobby Leach dies in an Auckland hospital from complications following the amputation. The newspapers report it. The cause of death is documented. It's a tragedy for sure, but the doctors of 1926 had done everything for him that they could. And then, at the bottom of most of the obituaries, almost as an afterthought, the reporters include the detail that sends the story around the world. Bobby Leach survived Niagara Falls. He didn't survive an orange peel. That's what he slipped on, a piece of orange peel on a sidewalk in New Zealand. The man who went over 167 feet of falling water in a steel barrel. The man who shattered both kneecaps and, metaphorically, walked away. The man who spent 15 years telling the world what it felt like to cheat death. Killed by fruit. His obituary in the New Zealand Herald read, "After a life of intrepid exploits and hairbreadth escapes, the actual incident that led to Bobby Leach's death seems like one of those ironies of fate that bestow the pages of ancient fiction. For having defied death 100 times, he at last owed his end to a piece of orange peel." If you had to choose between being 5 minutes early and 5 minutes late for a flight, which would you pick? Johanna Gonthaler and her husband Kurt are at the gate in Rio de Janeiro's International Airport, and the door is closed. The jetway is retracted, and the aircraft is pushing back. They have just missed their flight, Air France Flight 447 to Paris. Johanna is furious. Now they're going to have to rebook everything. They're going to have to spend another night in Rio figuring out new travel arrangements and calling family back in Italy and explaining the delay. It's a first world problem, but it's still a problem. An expensive, exhausting, deeply irritating problem. They're retirees from the South Tyrol region of northern Italy, right along the Austrian border. They've been vacationing in Brazil, and now they just want to get home. The Gonthalers rebook, they find accommodations, they eat, they sleep, and in the early hours of June 1st, 2009, hours after Flight 447 departed Rio de Janeiro, something goes wrong over the Atlantic Ocean. The aircraft encounters severe conditions in the Intertropical Convergence Zone, a notoriously volatile stretch of weather between Brazil and the African coast. Ice crystals form on the external speed sensors, the pitot tubes, feeding the instruments bad data. the autopilot disconnects. The pilots, suddenly flying manually in zero visibility conditions at 35,000 feet, receive conflicting airspeed readings. The aircraft begins to slow. At 35,000 feet at night over open ocean in a storm, the window between flying and stalling is measured in seconds. Air France Flight 447 enters an aerodynamic stall. It does not recover. The aircraft descends, or more appropriately, falls at nearly 11,000 feet per minute, nose up, warning systems screaming, with the pilots scrambling to understand what is happening. At 2:14 a.m., Flight 447 hits the surface of the Atlantic Ocean at about 175 miles per hour. All 228 people on board are killed. It's one of the deadliest aviation disasters in French history. The main wreckage will not be located for nearly 2 years. The next morning, back in Rio, Johanna and Kurt are watching the morning news when news of the crash flashes across the screen. They both see their flight number appear on the screen, the same number still printed on the itinerary in her bag. And something clicks in Johanna's head. That was her flight. If they had arrived at that gate just minutes earlier, not hours, not days, minutes, they would be dead, floating on the Atlantic Ocean. They catch a flight to Munich, Germany, and from there, they rent a car for the 3 to 4 hour drive the rest of the way back to Italy. Can you imagine the conversation they must have had? Or maybe they didn't talk at all, each too engrossed in their own heads, swimming in a stew of relief and survivor's guilt, thinking about how close they came, how impossibly, absurdly close. Everyone who hears their story calls them the luckiest people alive. They are, by every available measure, among the most fortunate people on the planet. And then, on that long drive home, somewhere on the road near Kufstein, Austria, the Gondler's car drifts across the center line. The impact with the oncoming truck is head on. Kurt survives with serious injuries, but Johanna is killed. The woman who'd been spared from the worst aviation disaster in the history of Air France, spared by a missed gate, by traffic, by a matter of minutes, dies just over a week later on a road in the Austrian countryside. The investigation into the car accident finds no real explanation, no unusual weather, no mechanical failure of the truck, just a car in the wrong lane. 2 brushes with death, separated by just a few days. The first one misses her. The second one doesn't. And there's no explanation that makes it make sense. Friday, October 21st, 1966. The village of Aberfan, South Wales. 9:09 a.m. on a chilly, misty morning. The children of Pangloss Junior School have been in class for less than 10 minutes. First period's just started. Teachers are calling names to see who's there and who's not. Kids are pulling out notebooks and sharpening their pencils. The school sits at the base of a steep hillside. Above it, visible from the upper floor windows on a clear day, are the slag heaps, massive mounds of coal waste dumped there by the National Coal Board over decades of mining operations. Some of the heaps are 7 stories high. They've been there so long that people in Aberfan don't even look at them anymore. They're part of the landscape. They're just there. But some people were paying attention and were more than a little worried. Mothers had petitioned the school's head teacher just the year before, saying, maybe we should do something about these huge piles called tips of mining waste perched right over the school. The coal board had been warned, not by only the locals, but by miners themselves, that the spoil heaps were unstable, but nothing was done. At 9:15 a.m., tip number 7 gives way. Not with a sound anyone in the school hears in time to react. Not with a crack or a warning. The tip, a huge mass of rain-saturated coal waste and rock, just starts to move. A slow release, then faster, then catastrophic. A black wave, sometimes 40 feet thick, breaking free from the hillside and pouring down toward the village below. It's moving at roughly 20 miles per hour when it hits the school. The children never hear it coming. In an instant, Pontglass Junior School ceases to exist as a structure. The walls collapse inward, roofs drop. Classrooms filled with black sludge that hardens like concrete within minutes around everything inside. Desks, chairs, books, children. And the devastation doesn't stop there. The landslide continues past the school into the village, destroying houses, burying everyone inside. By the time it stops, 144 people are dead. 116 of them are children between the ages of 7 and 10, most of them while still sitting at their desks. The rescue kicks in right away with workers digging by hand because using machines risks destabilizing the aftermath. Families wait at the edges. And the first bodies come out quickly, but then the pace slows down as the sludge hardens and hope turns to recovery. By the end of the first day, everyone knows there will be no more survivors. The village of Aberfan buries its children over the following week. The graves are arranged in rows. The headstones, when they come, all carry dates within the same narrow range. 7 years old, 8 years old, 9, 10. A whole generation of a small village gone in seconds. But that's not the end of the story from Aberfan. In the weeks after the funerals, as investigators are documenting the negligence that caused the disaster and journalists are filing reports on the National Coal Board's failures, parents in Aberfan started talking. Not loudly, not publicly, but in kitchens and at gravesites. To neighbors and to doctors, to anyone who will listen without just brushing them off as either overly grief-stricken or just plain nuts. They said their children had told them something was going to happen. Not in those words, and certainly not clearly enough in a way that anyone could have done something about it, but specific enough that in the aftermath, the details became impossible to just put aside. A 10-year-old girl named Errol Mae Jones had gone to her mom about 2 weeks before the disaster and says, very quietly, "I'm not afraid to die, Mommy." Her mom asks her why she would say something like that. And Errol Mae says, "I'll be with Peter and June." Peter and June are 2 of her classmates. Then on October 20th, the day before the landslide, Errol Mae tells her mom about a dream she had the night before. She says, "Mommy, I dreamt I went to school and there was no school there. Something black had come down all over it." Her mom hugs her and tells her it's just a dream. Errol Mae Jones is 10 years old. She dies the next morning at Pontglass Junior School. She's buried in the communal grave with Peter on one side and June on the other. Her parents later give a written account of these conversations, sworn to by a local clergyman to the researchers who come looking for answers. Because Errol Mae isn't the only one. An 8-year-old boy named Paul Davies had been drawing in class in the days leading up to the disaster. His final drawing shows a mass of figures digging in a hillside, and beneath it he had written 2 words: "The end." Paul does not survive. When a psychiatrist named Dr. John Barker collects and cross-references these accounts in the immediate aftermath, he receives 76 written responses to a newspaper appeal, of which he found 24 with what he considers sufficient corroboration. witnesses who can confirm that the dreams or statements had been shared before the disaster happened. The details aren't identical. They couldn't have been coordinated. These are separate families, separate children, separate conversations. But the theme is consistent. Something black, something heavy, not being able to breathe. Now, Barker is a credentialed, published psychiatrist who works at Shelton Hospital in Shrewsbury, not a fringe researcher. What he finds in Aberfan disturbs him enough that in 1967, he establishes the British Premonitions Bureau, a formal registry for people to report dreams or visions of future events before they happen. The Bureau collects nearly 1,000 reports in the 18 months it's open. A small number of those reports actually align with events that followed. A plane crash, the assassination of Robert Kennedy. Specific enough to note, not specific enough to prevent. Somehow it never is. Barker dies of a brain hemorrhage in August of 1968, just 18 months after founding the Bureau. And in one of those details that seems almost too strange to be true, 2 of the Bureau's most frequent contributors had reportedly warned him in the weeks before that they sensed something was going to happen to him. The Bureau closes after his death and the research is filed away. But the testimonies from the families of Aberfan are never explained, not by the official inquiry, not by the subsequent research, not by anything that came after. Children in the days and weeks before October 21st, 1966, described in some form through dreams, through drawings, through words spoken to parents in family kitchens, something coming down the mountain, something black, something that covered the school. Some of them tried to tell us what they had seen before it happened, and no one knew what they were describing until it was too late. So, that's 3 stories where fate whispered before it struck. But the whispering didn't stop here. See, when our friend, Mr. E-Files, brought these cases to us, there were way too many for one video. Too many people who cheated death and then lost the bet anyway. So we decided to team up and split it down the middle. And I gotta say, it blows my mind that this kind of thing happens often enough that we made 2 separate episodes. My half, you just heard. His half is waiting for you right now on his channel. And I'm telling ya, what he's got over there is just as unsettling as what I brought you today. Maybe more so. So if these 3 stories got under your skin, do yourself a favor. Click the link right here and head over to Mr. E-Files and find out what happens when death doesn't just whisper. It comes back to collect. Be careful out there, and I will see you here again on the In-Between.